You're listening to the MurphologyPodcast. Thanks for tuning in to the MurphologyPodcast. I'm your host, Kathy, aka Murph. I'm here to share with you interviews about biking experiences from bicyclists who have pedaled to great places all over the U.S. Each week we will get to know new people and explore new destinations to ride your bike. As you listen to the amazing adventures people share, you may wonder, why haven't I done that? Well, on the show today, we have Rob McKillop. Hey, Rob McKillop.
Hey, Kathy. How are you?
Good, really good. I have to say, I apologize. We are on location at a local establishment here in Cedar Rapids, so there may be a little background noise, so I guess I'm acknowledging it. Let's all get used to it, and hopefully it doesn't cause too many issues while we're recording.
Just part of the fun.
Just part of the fun, yeah, as we clink our beer glasses together. We were talking right before we pushed record, trying to figure out how long we've been friends, and we determined that it's been almost 10 years, coming up on 10 years.
Right.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I can remember first meeting you on Wednesday Night Bike Club.
Yeah.
And so I was a pretty serious bike racer at the time, and I think you helped me learn about having fun on a bike.
The social side. You probably came all kitted up thinking that we were going to do a 100-mile ride, and we probably did 25 with 3 beer stops.
I still always come all kitted up.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah. Well, I want to get into, the reason that you're on the podcast is because you're pretty serious about cycling, but you also have a great social side as far as biking, which is why we get to see you occasionally here in Cedar Rapids. But also the events that you've been part of are just mind-blowing to me. So that's why you're on.
Okay.
And because you're a cool guy, right?
Yeah.
I'll say both of those. So. Well, let's start out by tell the listeners a little bit about where you live and what bicycling is like what the culture is like.
So I live in Cedar Rapids, just like you.
Yep.
And the culture here has really changed a lot. When I first moved back to Cedar Rapids in 2002, there weren't a lot of people riding. And then, of course, we had the big flood of 2008. Kind of destroyed things. And so when I would be out riding, the only time I would see other people out riding was in the build up to Ragbri. All of a sudden there would be a lot of people out there cramming to get in shape for end of July, and then it would peter off really quickly afterwards. But it's just been really amazing. I can be out riding at night in the dark, 10 miles up the trail, and I'll see 2 other people. And the amount of people biking here has just really taken off, and I think part of that comes from the kind of the revitalization of the Nubo area,
sure,
right, where there's a lot of great places to go, trails that take you there, and and to and from, and that sort of thing. And so there's just a lot of people that get introduced to bikes, and then they're almost kind of in a parallel universe. There's bike racing, and so that's going on unbeknownst to most people. If it's time trial, it could be on an old deserted road somewhere, or fat bike race in the winter. And so those are all over the place, and I think that's kind of continued, although certainly fat biking and then now gravel has really taken off, and roads kind of diminished a little bit as people get a little bit more concerned about riding on the road, just kind of in general, and just kind of there's some negativity related to road racing, but the other kind of racing is picked up. So I like all different kinds of racing and riding, and so all good for me.
Yeah, really, you mentioned about racing and like time trials and stuff that happens, and the only time I ever know that's happening is based on social media. You'll either post photos, or we should probably give a shout out to Barry Breffel and Todd Brown. I'll see their photos and then be like, what? I didn't even, not that I would be somebody who would race along there, but it'd be fun to be a spectator.
Right.
Especially, we have a race car track here in Cedar Rapids. It's called Hawkeye Downs, and I don't recall if it's asphalt, cement, or dirt. Asphalt. Okay. So obviously cars race on there, but you've been on your bike doing races. Like you guys used to go every week or every month?
It's been a couple times a month times, and then it was off for a couple of years, and then now Crandick and Goosetown have picked it back up, and so the last couple of years we've been racing once a month. And just like you see on TV, if you happen to really like watching bike racing, the World UCI track racing is going on right now, and so they do different kind of track races and that kind of thing. And this is kind of a little bit of a combination, not on track bikes, but road bikes, but I always tell people it's kind of like the Cliff Notes version of bike racing, and because it's wide, there's plenty of room, and so you don't have to worry about smashing into people and that kind of thing. But you can try. I'm going to just try hanging on and try to win a sprint, or I'm going to try to just get away. Just try whatever you want, and if it turns out to work, great, do more of it. If it turns out to be dumb, then try something else. And you're going to race 4 or 5 times a night. It's not like the kind of thing where, I'm going to try this in this one triathlon that I do once a year.
Sure.
And gosh, that didn't work this year, so maybe next year I'll try something different. You can, go kind of through that in a night. And it's just a great way to get introduced to bike racing.
Yeah, and I will say that, too, about being here in Cedar Rapids. And I would hope that people listening in their hometown, it exists. But, in addition to the time trial, the racing that you were mentioning, we have hundreds of miles of gravel. Like you said, people are getting a little bit more active outside of road biking because of, issues with people driving distracted and those sorts of things. But and then fat biking, of course. There's just like all kinds of things to do on your bike, and many different kinds of bikes. Right. Which brings me to my next question. Do you remember how you first got into biking as an adult?
Well, I'll share a quick story that goes a little bit farther back.
Okay.
When I was a teenager, I just really lusted after bikes. I would look in the catalogs and go in bike shops forever and ever, and I mowed lawns for a couple years and shoveled snow, and I got a really nice road bike. Gitan Tour de France. I think it was like a 77 or 78.
As a teenager, you got it?
To age myself. Yeah, right.
Oh, okay.
And I loved that bike. I rode it all the time. And then to make my last tuition payment for college, I had to sell it to my brother. Oh. And I never had a bike. And for almost I did mainly running and basketball and softball and all those kind of things, volleyball, until I was almost 40. And then bought a bike to start doing duathlons and then triathlons, and then so just kind of got back into it again. And then like 10 years ago, I went and bought the bike back from my brother. So I was going to say,
I wondered if he still had it.
I have it in my basement. It's not rideable, but I was
going to say, is it more of a showpiece now?
It's more of a showpiece.
Here it is. Oh, that is so awesome.
But I just kind of started with a touring bike, road bike, and and then now I have a bike for every kind of racing. Yeah. Maybe a few more.
Yeah. Why do you think that you haven't settled on one part of biking, meaning just road racing or just time trials or just fat biking? Like, why do you think that you've maintained that interest in multiple types?
Well, I like different kinds of racing, so I don't want to just do one. And also they kind of vary through the year, right? And so my big race is the Leadville 100 in August, right? Yeah. And so I try to peak for that, right? And so then my off season is kind of September, October, and then November I start picking back up to be in shape for fat bike racing. And so so it gives me a cycle. That means I don't really race cyclocross. I do a little bit for fun, but that's kind of my off season, where I ride, but not like with a specific purpose, just for fun. Sure. But then, fat biking, gravel racing, mountain biking, road riding, time trials, kind of fill out the whole year. So there's always things to do. And I love to race, and I love to have like a big event or multiple big events to kind of motivate me to get out and, train tonight because I got to get ready for something in the future versus, I'll just sit around and drink beer and not get out there, right? I mean, I personally really need like some sort of event in the future to really motivate me and get me, really out there and after it.
And I think a lot of people would say that you have to have something that there's an end goal that kind of keeps you going. And
But I just like all different kinds of racing. And I certainly as I get older, I kind of gravitated from shorter things to really long things, right? I joke that my biggest athletic strength right now is digestion, right? and that's a serious, half fun, half serious. Yeah. Because the really long races, the key is to be able to eat and drink, right, no matter what. Yeah. Right? And so if you're going to do long races, so if I do a race, it's a couple hours, it's kind of on the line, but if it's 3 hours, 4 hours, 10, 12 hours or more, then it's all about eating and drinking, right? And if you aren't, you're going to be in trouble.
Oh, sure, yeah. I follow a lot of athletes on social media that they do talk a ton about my nutrition worked or it didn't work, or I didn't eat enough, or I felt yucky from what I ate. So you're right. You're totally right.
That's an interesting kind of thing I've learned from ragbri. I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, but you come into a town and you go, and kind of everybody in your group goes, I think we need something salty,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Or you come
yeah.
to the next town and you're like, I need something sweet,
Yeah.
right? Or I need I need a pork chop,
Right.
And but you learn to read your body, right? And so, and then you ride after that, and you learn, because when I first started riding, everybody just goes nothing but sugar, right? And it's like, after a while, that doesn't feel very good, right? But on ragbri, you kind of learn, and I'm lucky enough to have a stomach that handles that kind of thing.
Sure.
But like having some, I'll when I start a big race like Leadville, I'll have a ham and cheese sandwich in me. And I'll be eating that kind of stuff, throughout the day, because I'm not going to go 10 hours on goo, right?
Yeah. I don't know that there's that many people that can honestly say that they can eat just goo all day long.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Right.
true. A quick interruption to tell you this week's sponsor is Thirsty Pigs, a full-service mobile event company offering beer, wine, spirits, plus catering for any event. With over 18 years of experience, this team can do it all. Find out more at thirstypigs.com. You mentioned Leadville, and I've been interviewing a lot of people on this podcast who have experienced Leadville and are doing it again this year. So I want to get into that. But first I want to talk about, you hit on training. You're always training for something. I'm assuming that it depends on the actual event as to how much time you spend training. But can you tell us a little bit about that, as far as how and why you train, maybe the mental game?
Sure. So I set up a training plan at the beginning of the year that, you'll have typically 2 A races. And so like I have the Austin Rattler coming up at the end of March is kind of an A- race. And then my A+ race is Leadville. And so then my plan is kind of set up around that. And then I'll have B races like Lutsen, Dirty Kanza, other races like that. They're still big races, but you won't taper for those. Right, but you'll definitely, ease back going into those. And then, we were just talking, I'm going to do the Fat Bike Berkey this Saturday. I haven't changed my training load at all this week, but I smushed it, to the beginning of the week.
Right, to give your body a little bit of a break.
So my legs will be fresher, right, by the end of the week. And you gradually build at, a certain rate. If you look at it's mainly volume or time, but it has the amount of intensity is also a factor, right? And so a lot of people do use various things. I use Training Peaks that just kind of tracks that, and I can monitor my fitness, and that builds over the way their algorithm works. It builds over like a 40-some day period. So when you work out, it takes a while for that fitness to go away, but your fatigue. Right. So you kind of, when you work out, you get fitness and fatigue, right? But you get the fitness as you recover, as you sleep and do all those kind of things. But the fatigue decays at like a week. And so you can kind of play with those different parameters and get to where you're building over time at a certain rate that isn't too crazy that you're going to get sick or injured or burned out, right? But hard enough and building up enough that you're, at peak fitness, by the time that event comes.
So that part, is easy to measure because you can always be looking at where you've been, what you've done, how your body feels. How about the mental game? Like when you wake up, I guess you're retired now, so you don't necessarily go to work and then have to think about a workout. But oh my gosh, I've got 6 hours of pedal time today. Like, how do you work through that?
Again, it's part of a bigger plan, right? And so that's part of, that I think that's what separates people who kind of want to be good at something versus who really are, right? Is that if you don't really track it, I've seen this myself, right? When I was trained for a 5K or something like that, right? Well, I would kind of mentally track all the times I intended to work out that week.
Oh, yeah.
Which is
that's so true.
Twice as many times as I actually worked out. So if you actually write it down, you go, wow, I was going to work out like 5 times and I really only worked out 3 and the one was kind of halfway, and whatever else. But if you really write it down, track it in a spreadsheet, use software, it really holds you accountable, right? Just like hiring a coach or, whatever. But, by really having it there, that really forces you to, like today, the workouts I did today are for August. Well, there's fun along the way, but it's ultimately for August 15th, right? And so, but I know that you have to build to get to the level of fitness for a race that big. I need to build, through the year. You can't just like come July 31st go, wow, I really need to get in shape. That might work for a 5K. It doesn't work for a 100-mile bike race.
Right. Okay, so if you look at all the events that you've done over the years, you have been everywhere to do bike races or just for biking for fun.
Yep.
Do you have a couple places that you could point out that you just love to go there and ride, whether it's ride or race?
Well, Colorado, jumps out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's, certainly northern Wisconsin, Minnesota. I love Iowa, but, we that black dirt that we have here, makes for a lot of muddy, conditions that ends up getting races canceled, whereas other places, Colorado, obviously the scenery is spectacular. And I've really fallen in love with Leadville, the Leadville 100 and the series and that kind of thing, and just the whole mindset around it, about not quitting and dig deep and all those kind of things. It's really, that having done an Ironman and then moving to that, like I think a lot of people have, Ironman is more corporate and more, still a huge effort and huge training, but the Leadville thing is more kind of like you're part of a family.
Oh,
and
sure.
So it's something that really resonates with me, and so I really got addicted to it. And so, I'm going for my 7th buckle this year, and so that obviously I've become very infatuated with that race.
I was going to mention that the trophy or the award when you make the Leadville 100 cutoff is literally a belt buckle, right?
Right. Yep.
And then also if you place like in your age group or under a certain time, do you get a second buckle?
A certain time, yeah. So if you finish in under 12 hours, you get a belt buckle, and so I have 6 of those.
Awesome,
right?
Yeah.
But if you finish in under 9 hours, then you get the big belt buckle, and I have none of those. So
okay,
there's. But my first year of retirement, I've got my fingers crossed.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to be a little bit of a moonshot here. But if you make it to 10, then you still get a big belt buckle. So I still have that in front of me.
10 Leadville 100s?
Yeah, you get a 1,000-mile buckle.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Well, when you talk about all these events, obviously you ride different bikes for each type of event. What would you say your bike of choice, or I'm sure we have to say plural because you have so many. So give us an idea of some of your bikes of choices.
Well, so I have 4 fat bikes, which people are always surprised by. But, when I go back and look at the mileage, I probably have 25,000 miles on those 4 fat bikes.
Wow.
So they're pretty well used,
Yeah.
right? And I've raced them all. This weekend, I'm going to race my Salsa Bear Grease because it's, light, not going to be, rocky or rough and that kind of thing. So I try to pick the bike that's, best suited for the event. Mountain biking, Leadville, I've done, on a couple different mountain bikes. I've done it on my full suspension fat bike a couple of years, and then this past year I did it in my truck top fuel that I have that I love. And so, I spread my love around between the bikes, but I definitely love fat bikes. I ride way more miles on those than anything else, and then, try to pick the one that fits the situation the best. For rides like Ragbri or ride across Wisconsin or those kind of things, and then I have my Fat Equinox to ride for that, which is a pretty interesting bike.
I want to get into that one right now. So you are famous. And your bike is famous.
My bike
for
is
this.
famous. I don't know about me.
Well,
but
you
my
are
bike
because
is.
you own the bike, and you kind of, it was your vision and your dream. But for people who don't know, you do have to look it up, because if you Google Fat Bike Time Trial, your bike comes up and all these like amazing photos. So let me give you my background on it, because I don't know very much, and then you tell us a little bit about this, how it came to be. But you took a Trek TTX Equinox. You got in touch with a company called Cycle Carbon.
Right.
I hope I'm saying this right.
You are.
And you have turned this fat bike into a time trial fat bike.
Right.
And you call it the Fat Equinox?
Fat Equinox, right.
Fat Equinox.
Yep.
So, all right. Give it away. Tell us.
I think you covered it. If you'd asked me my favorite bike, I'm trying to remember the time, probably 6-7 years ago, it would have been definitely my time trial bike, right? My Equinox. I love that bike. It was the one I could win races on, and so it just fit me perfectly. And then one year it was the state time trial championships, and I was just warming up and just kind of spinning up to speed, and the handlebars ripped off in my hands, and
are you
I
kidding?
crashed. And luckily at a slow speed versus a high speed, because we were just warming up. I happened to have a fat bike, and because we were going on a beer ride after that, so I raced. I did the time trial on my fat bike. So
you did the time trial in a fat bike?
So I just grabbed that and then still did the race.
Oh
And so
my
maybe that was a
gosh.
little bit of the inspiration. But anyway, I only owned one fat bike at the time, and so I was kind of thinking about another one, and my favorite bike was sitting there hanging on the wall. And then my buddy Drew up at Cyclocarbon, he and I talked about a few things, met at a few races, and we just kind of got going back and forth over the winter. And I had some of the ideas and spec'd it out, but he's the artist. He did all the work, and came up with just a really amazing bike. It's got all the original parts, and in fact the top is really the same as what it used to be, and the bottom,
nice.
He cut up and reformed into something that's a fat bike. And so I've traveled all over the world, and I go into a bike shop and I'm like, hey, have you ever heard of this bike? And I'm always like, yeah, I've heard of it, and I'm like, well, that's my bike.
That's mine.
And it's been on, it's got a couple of Reddit pages. It had magazine articles written about it, and it was red, and now it's orange and black when Drew got some new paints. And it was kind of early in his business, and it was kind of a marketing sort of thing. And now he's got just tons of business. Not just because of this bike, but it was a way to show off because he was just doing repairs, but it was a way to show off his artistry. Since then he's doing a ton of paint jobs. Just people who just want their bike to look cooler, and he repaints them versus just doing repairs when crap, I cracked my my frame in half. Kind of thing.
And does this bike still get out and race?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I did. Well, I used it on Raw the last 2 or 3 years.
Okay. And for people who don't know Raw, so Raw is literally right across Wisconsin in one day. I mean, I think now they do a 2-day version.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But most people are on high-level road bikes. I mean, they're trying to ride, 170?
It's 230 miles now.
Oh, I'm sorry, 230 miles.
It used to be 178 when we crossed the southern part. Now that we crossed the northern part, it's a little bit wider. So all the smart people are riding road bikes.
And then here's Rob in a fat bike time trial bike.
Yep. So it's just a lot of fun, and I ride it on Ragbri, and it's just a great conversation starter, and I've met just a ton of people know about the bike and that kind of thing, and it's just a super fun bike to have.
Yeah. And to your knowledge, has anybody tried to duplicate it?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen one, but
I'm assuming it will always be a one of a kind. Well, speaking of one of a kind, you're definitely a guy, probably the only guy that I know that has done as many events that you have done as far as races. Even like right across Wisconsin isn't really truly a race, but I think you ride it as if it's a race. I mean, you're out to
it's like a fondo, right? Which are like, I'm doing air quotes, but which is not exactly a race, but it's kind of a race, kind of thing.
A quick interruption to tell you this week's podcast is sponsored by Lizard Lips Lip Balm. These great lip balms contain natural ingredients, come in a variety of flavors, and you can choose certified organic or balms with sun protection. Check it out at lizardlips.net. Now back to the show. Well, let's get into some of the events that you've been in, and I want to highlight on maybe the name of the event, where it's located, and then anything fun that you want to share about them. But we do have a category that you've raced in a ton, and that's on snow, which I'm going to assume is a fat bike just because, what else would you ride on snow? But give us some ideas of some races that you've done on snow.
It was probably 12 years ago. T-Rex, Todd Erickson, first got me into riding out in the snow. And it was before fat bikes, so it was probably 2009, 2010. And we would just ride mountain bikes, and
through the snow.
And, we had none of the right gear and none of the right bikes, but we still loved it. And he talked me into doing Triple D, which is something, Lance Andres put on for quite a few years now. It's run by Timbra, the Dubuque Bike Racing Association. I just started doing that, and the first year I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. The next year I was a little smarter, but that's always been the kind of race I really like, right? One that's a big challenge, right? One that, I write a couple paragraphs of a race report, here's what I did that was really stupid, here's the things that worked, here's, my clothing, my food, my boots, my bike, my, and all that kind of stuff. And then the next year I look at that, right? And so first 2 years Well, first year nobody finished, anybody that I did it, and then I think the next year I made it halfway, and then I made it, and then now I do pretty well in the race. But you just keep learning over time, right?
And the
what
Triple
works and what
D,
doesn't.
it takes place in Iowa, correct?
Yep.
So it's in Dubuque, Iowa.
The first D is for Dubuque.
Got it.
The second is for Dyersville, and the third is for Durango.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
That's where Triple D comes from.
I think this year was pretty brutal. I mean, it happens at a time in Iowa where it's typically really, really cold.
Yeah, the second week of January, and in winter bike races, the snow conditions can make it super easy and super fast, or make it impossible, right? And so this past year, we had a bunch of snow that morning, and then after the snow came like a hurricane.
Yeah, it was so windy. Like the photographs I saw were just incredible.
My clothes were good. My bike was good. I was running in third place. We walked a lot, pushed the bike through the snow a lot. And, there's a gravel section as you get out towards Farley. Normally we ride right through, but, we had to push through because the snow drifts were foot or more deep. And the wind was just incredible. I had a fully loaded fat bike. When I got to the top of the hill, blew my bike right out of my hands and into the cornfield.
Are you kidding?
That's how hard it was blowing. And then as we tried to, we were all separated, but as we tried to ride down the road to the south, it was a really strong west wind. It would literally just blow you right across the road in the ditch before you had a chance to even know what happened. And so by the time we got to back on the trail at Farley, there was a place to stop, and I was just like, I never stop. Like, that's my thing, never quit, no matter what, right? Never quit. But I was just like, okay, this is just dangerous.
It's not going to work,
it's
yeah.
Not, I don't care if it's crazy, I don't care if it's hard, but this was just dangerous, right? But now my buddy Mike Manny still finished it because he's an amazing athlete.
But I think we should make note that only one person finished that entire.
Right.
I mean, of everyone who did Triple D, one person finished.
Right. So it can be a really hard race. The other races. This year I did Tuscobia. I did the 80 versus the mile versus the 160. So I'm trying to get into longer, crazier, colder rides here. It was the first race I've done that had mandatory safety gear. You had to have a sleeping bag and a bivvy. And,
in case you get lost?
In case you just get tired and cold. And, because this year it was actually warm, which made it a lot harder in the upper 30s and raining, mid-30s and raining.
And which race is this?
Tuscobia. It's in northern Wisconsin.
Oh, okay. Got it.
But it can be like 30 or 40 below. And
sure.
And there's nobody that's going to come rescue your butt. You got to be able to survive. And then I would like to do Arrowhead 135 next year, which is up in International Falls, which is about as cold as it gets. And the same thing there. You got to have the gear to be able to, make it through the night, so they don't have to. So you'll be fine to go in the morning.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. You don't want to be found frozen stiff somewhere.
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
And then this weekend, at least while we're recording, it's going to be happening this weekend. You're going to do the Fat Bike Birkie.
Yep, I think this is the maybe 6th year. I could be wrong on that, but it's up on the Birkenbeiner Trail up in Cable and Hayward, Wisconsin, which is, if you're a cross-country skier, is hallowed ground. When you're just driving around up there, you don't really know that there's such an amazing place back in there, but it's just like just an amazing roller coaster, perfectly groomed, steep hills up and down, around the corner, all that kind of stuff. And so at the end of the season, they let fat bikes in there, and so there's a 47-kilometer race and then a couple of shorter races. And so it's something we've been doing for a while. A bunch of us go up there, rent a lodge, and go have fun. So definitely a challenging race for me. I'm good at the endurance stuff, but get to be a little bit of a chicken on the high-speed descents because you don't have control in the snow necessarily.
Right, I was going to say,
right?
Yeah, you're on a fat bike.
I've crashed pretty hard out there. I have to kind of overcome my fear and just let actually, kind of funny. Last year, one of my fellow competitors, I would pass all these guys going up the hills, and then they would all pass me going down. And one of the guys finally said, dude, if you'd actually let your bike go going down the hills, you'd be like miles ahead of us. I'm like, all right, if it's that obvious, maybe I better lay off the brakes. So that's what I'm thinking about going into this week's race, is stay off the brakes.
But be safe.
Of course.
Yes. How about, so that's kind of the fat bike stuff. How about mountain bike?
The Austin Rattler is at the end of March. That's That's a Leadville qualifier, and so I'll race that on a mountain bike down in Austin, Texas. I think that's 100 kilometers as well. I'll race the Lutsen 99er up in northern Minnesota. That I'll race on a fat bike because there is a fat bike category.
Oh, nice. Okay.
I used to race everything on fat bikes until my wife told me to stop being stupid and only race fat bikes where there was a category, and she was right, of course. I'm trying to do that now. So then this year I'm going to do a race I've never done before, but still part of the Leadville series. I'm going to do the Tahoe Trail 100. It's a beautiful area. I've never really ridden bikes out there, and so I'm going to shoot out there in the early July. And then a bunch of us are going to do the Leadville 100 is actually 104 miles, but all in a day. But 2 weeks before that, at the beginning of August, they have a stage race where they do it in 3 days. And so you kind of do the first 40 miles to the big climb of Columbine, first day, second day up and down Columbine, third day from there back, right? And so there's a bunch of us who are going to go do that. And so that'll be a lot of fun, and that'll be a good, warm up for Leadville a couple of weeks later. And then, I race here whenever the race isn't canceled or delayed because of mud.
There was a ton that were canceled in 2019.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
But I love, there's usually a marathon class, which is kind of as many laps as you can do in 3 hours. And so that's a great event for me.
A lot of people, at least around here in the Midwest, talk about Dirty Kansas.
Right.
I've never actually been there as a spectator. So can you tell us a little bit about, I'm assuming that you've been part of that.
So I've done it once before.
Okay.
I did the 100 back 5 or 6 years ago.
And is it 100 miles in a day or until you finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right. I think the 200 is the real race.
Okay.
I'm doing air quotes. Sorry, air quotes again. Real race. But there was a 100 option, and then there was 50 and a 25 and various things. And so now there's a DKXL, which is I think 375 miles. Because the 200 wasn't hard enough. So
do you do that as a team, or do people do it as individuals?
No, the really top athletes do the 375.
Wow.
So you have to kind of be invited into that one. They know who you are.
Right?
Sure. This year. I plan to do it on a fat bike, and so it's a lottery. You have to get in, and so I'm entered in the fat bike category. We'll see how that goes, right? But I'm doing the real race, the 200 this year, and so. But the advantage of being retired is I have more time to get more miles in, right? Versus kind of more intense workouts and that kind of thing. So hopefully I can be ready.
And I don't think we pointed out, but that Dirty Kansas is actually gravel. So
yep. Yeah, it's the Flint. So like the gravel here in Iowa is kind of rounded, right? And so it's maybe loose and bumpy, but it's not sharp. Mm-hmm. Whereas the Flint rock there in Kansas is sharp.
Oh.
And so flat tires and all that kind of stuff is kind of a bigger deal down there. The year I did it, there was a crazy rainstorm the night before, and there was a 3-mile section of mud where we were just caked. Each foot weighed 50 pounds. Your bike weighed 100 pounds. You had to couldn't push it because everything was clogged up, and it took, I forget, 3 hours or something like that to get through that section. They had to change the whole race. Otherwise, no one would have finished the race because we were all just so caked in mud. So it was like the famous mud year.
Yeah. Well, not to mention how easy your equipment could break. When you get too much mud packed in there.
A lot of derailleurs got snapped off that year. Mm-hmm. Luckily I made it, but I had definitely appreciation for the race, even the 100, the little baby version of the race.
And you did that, and then you still want to come back.
Yeah, definitely, right. Well, I at the time they didn't have a fat bike category. And then my buddy Adam Blake down at World of Bikes, he pointed out to me we were doing a ride and that there was a fat bike category, and he's like, "Dude, you should go do that."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "They have a fat bike category?" And so I researched it, signed up, and I got in. So
that's awesome. So all these races that you do each year and all the training for the races, do you ever just get out on your bike for fun?
Yes.
Okay.
So sometimes on Wednesday nights I go out for fun with a certain group in town once in a while. I'll ride with my wife. Hopefully this summer a little bit more with the grandkids, pull them in the trailer and that kind of thing. But in a training plan, there is always maybe a couple long rides, a couple, interval rides, and then a couple just recovery rides. And so those are the perfect kind of rides to ride with friends or, just go have fun and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I bike commuted for 18 years to work every day, and so that's fun. I rode my bike over here.
I was going to say, you commuted here tonight.
Yeah, right, all the way here.
And you've been to Cuyuna.
Right.
Like that's on my bucket list.
Yeah.
And I almost was able to go with you guys last year.
Uh-huh.
I didn't ended up going. That's more for fun, right?
Yep.
You're not racing when you're there.
Nope.
You're just doing that for fun.
I have done races there, but when we go up with the family, it's for fun.
Okay. And then, of course, I talk about RAGBRAI all the time on this podcast, but that's something that you're not getting up at 6 a.m. to race to the end. You're enjoying the experience. And
No. We get up at 8 or 9 and take the whole day to ride to the next place. And actually, it's not like a serious hard ride, and I'll usually ride with my wife and go at her speed or whatever speed of whoever we're with. But from an overall volume, when I look at it on my training plan and the results and that kind of thing, it's still plenty of miles.
Yeah.
And it's still usually hot.
Yes.
And so I'm always looking for altitude accommodations, right? Come middle of August. And so the heat is really kind of the same accommodation, right? To increase blood volume and capillaries. And so the heat training is almost as good as altitude training. So it all works. And
I should point out that, you know, most people on RAGBRAI camp like intense, but you do RAGBRAI in luxury.
Yeah, we have 4 large RVs that travel together. So, yeah.
Yeah,
it's probably a little bit different than some of the people are experiencing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're still putting the miles in. It's just a little bit nicer that you've got a shower and a bed and a refrigerator full of food. So that's
an air conditioner.
And an air conditioner. That's the best part. Yeah. One more competitive event I wanted to touch on that I forgot to. You mentioned that you've done Ironman.
Right.
So just maybe give like a little snippet of how that's different from doing these other races.
Oh, sure. So I started, I think like I mentioned, I was a runner, and then I kind of got into duathlons because I kind of remembered liking bikes, and then the kind of natural progression is into, sprint triathlons, that kind of thing.
Sure.
I absolutely hated swimming, but I could kind of do it barely. And then, then I decided, the kind of the natural progression, like a salmon upstream, right? You go from the sprints to the halves.
Yeah,
you got to do a
going.
full, right? I think it was when I turned 50. I did Ironman Wisconsin. I spent a year or so, training for it. Had a plan. 3 bikes, 3 runs, 3 swims, and who knows? Maybe I'll do another one when I'm 60. We'll see. I got a few years to think about that, but I mean, I can still run, right, and I can still swim, right. I mean, obviously I've swam 2.4 miles at least once in my life. There weren't many bikes left by the time I got in. I was definitely one of the slowest swimmers by far. But, as I get older, and I think, when I was in my 20s, I played, all sorts of different sports, right? And gradually over time, I, eliminate the ones that I'm no good at anymore.
Well, yeah.
And then, and now as I'm getting older, right, I'm like really focused on biking because I'm still able to, with the right training and motivation and all those kind of things, still get better, right? Whereas my peak as a runner was, 30 years ago. I never peaked as a swimmer.
I was going to say as a swimmer.
Maybe that one's still in front of me, but I just don't really focus on the things that I don't enjoy that much. I always felt good after I swam, but boy, I hated it at 5:30 in the morning. My toes on the edge of the pool, staring at that cold water, thinking about jumping in. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I hear
I would pray that I forgot my goggles or something essential so I could go home.
Well, let's focus back on the bike. If you think about it, is there what's something that you're really proud of when it comes to your world on a bike?
I think one of the thing that's most interesting to me is kind of just do it for my own enjoyment, right? And it's something that gives me something to work towards and I'm motivated about, and I have fun doing it without really any arm twisting or whatever. I find that a lot of my friends kind of follow into the various kind of things that I've tried, and they try them out, and maybe they like them, maybe they don't. But I think a lot of people have kind of noticed me having fun, and maybe tried some different things that they wouldn't have tried. A lot of my triathlete friends went and got fat bikes because they were miserable being on a trainer all the time in the basement during the winter, right? And so get out and ride on their fat bike, and then they've turned out they loved it, right? And so it's been really interesting to me so that even without pushing it or oh my God, whatever, just people see me having fun and they're like, well, maybe I'll try some of that.
And I would put myself in that category because I don't remember how many years ago that you inspired me to be better at cold weather cycling.
Right.
Because you taught me, I'd come in, we'd be on a bike ride and I'd have 8 layers and my core would be just completely sweaty and my fingers would be frozen and my toes frozen. And you gave me such good advice about how to, regulate your temperature, and you don't have to wear so many clothes. And I was just like, awesome. And I also think we have a mutual friend. Should we say her name? Jenny Lorenz?
No, let's not. Let's not say her name.
Okay, we won't say her name. We'll just call her J-Lo. And I am keeping that in there. But she went from, I can't stand the cold, to now she'll be texting me saying, hey, I'm going out on a fat bike ride with the guys. You should join me. And it's just like, secretly it cracks me up. But then I'm like, you know what? More power to her, because she'll be bundled up correctly, and she absolutely loves biking year round now. Yeah,
she has a comfortable range of temperature between 70 and 72. But just like you said, I mean, and then reflecting back on when we first started riding in the winter, we all did it. At least I did it terribly, right? I mean, you'd be sweaty and cold. It'd be like the worst of everything. You'd be like freezing, boiling, sweating all at the same time, right? And now, even like I was just talking about how hard this last Triple D was, right? I was perfectly comfortable, right? I mean, I had the right clothes on, I had just the right amount of clothes. I had wind layers, even though it was kind of a surreal experience with all the craziness going around me. From a body perspective, everything was kind of dialed in and feeling good and that kind of thing. And that's something that, and you don't really have to spend a lot of money. You can just kind of like find the right kind of things and combine something you picked up at Walmart with something you picked up at Tyson's or Farm and Fleet or wherever, or just put it together in the right way and make it work so that you're comfortable kind of whatever temperature it is, or whether it's because I have a calibration for temperature, and then I have a calibration for it's a race, it's a hard training ride, I'm screwing around with friends, right? I mean, you have to kind of calibrate for all those things, but you can still be perfectly comfortable regardless of what temperature.
Yeah, and I always, when I see you when it's really, really cold out, I'm always like kind of shaking my head like, he does not have enough layer. He's going to be freezing. And then the next thing I see, you have got your sleeves pulled up because you're regulating your temperature on the fly. And
that's the key, is to not sweat, right? And so you got to kind of like be able to adjust. I mean, I use my arms kind of as radiators. I mean, a lot of people do different things, but be able to zip or just be able to do something, because the really smart fat bikers say, don't wait until, if something's annoying you, fix it now, right? Don't wait for half an hour until it's a problem, right? If it's just annoying now, fix it, right? If you're too hot, you're too cold, you're whatever's bugging you, fix it now. Your air pressure is too high, too low, too whatever, right? Fix it now. Don't wait for half an hour, an hour. It's not going to get better, right?
That's amazing advice. Fix it now. I'm going to write that down. Okay, last question for you. What keeps you motivated to continue the sport of cycling?
Well, I always like to get better, right? And so I have these big races, right? And then, I'm fascinated by my own health and, being able to manipulate my body in a way that suits me. And then I've got to kind of, do the calculus, not 20 or 30 anymore, where kind of like whatever works, right? So now I got to kind of like figure out, well, can I get better can I train and nutrition and rest and all those things at a pace faster than I'm, going downhill as I get older, right? Yeah. So that's kind of a fascinating sort of thing to figure out and then as I get older, okay, well, and how am I going to have to change my training and those sorts of things? And so, pretty fascinated by that. And I've always tried to stay in shape my whole life, right? And so I'm going to try to do that as long as I can. Yeah. And so, biking is something I love, and so it's easy for me to keep doing that and to kind of keep experimenting with my own body and my own happiness and figure out how to make it work.
And happiness is important, so yeah.
Exactly.
And it's very obvious, even I know you personally, but it's even obvious sitting here that you truly enjoy cycling and figuring out how it works and how your body adapts to changes when you're on the bike. It's very motivating.
Yep. That's that keeps me busy. I'm retired, and so now it's my job.
That's a great job to have, man. Yeah. I want that job. Well, I know that you have a pretty full calendar for 2020, so I want to, you mentioned quite a few of the events that you're going to be doing, but I am hopeful or planning to be a spectator at Leadville, so I'm hoping that I'll be there to see you get your next buckle, maybe 2 buckles.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll have you on the crew, and I'll have some instructions for you. We'll give you some training, and I'm sure you'll do fine.
The last I interviewed a woman named Kristen Heath couple weeks ago.
Yep, I remember that.
And she is doing Leadville, and we were joking about it. And she's like, "Do you want to be on my crew?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't want to ruin anything. I think I'll just be a spectator. So if I'm on your crew, it'll have to be something simple like fill up a water bottle or something. I don't know what
that might not be simple, because there's all different kind of things I might want.
Okay, I think I'll just be a spectator. I'll just cheer you on from afar. So. But anyway, thank you, Rob, for being on the podcast, and I wish you, I guess you don't really need luck, but I just hope that you end up having a really fun 2020 as a retired professional cyclist, athlete, person that likes biking.
And grandfather.
And grandfather, yeah.
Right.
Times how many?
4.
Okay, grandfather times 4.
Yeah,
so
right.
Excited to see what 2020 brings you.
So am I.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kathy.
Well, that is it for this week. If you have a moment, please go to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe, rate, and review the Murphology Podcast. Also, check out MurphologyPodcast.com to find all kinds of great info. You can even email me your topic ideas at MurphologyPodcast@gmail.com. I'll leave you with this quote from the unwritten book of Murphology. This quote is from The Female Hustlers. Everything that has value in life is a product of consistency. Success, health, fitness, wealth, friendships, relationships, and all other aspirations are all about consistency. If only people understood how important it is to be consistent. Think about it.